the recording. And so, I want to say again, welcome to everyone. For those of you who are just joining us, for just joining for the recording, we had a little conversation before the recording started, and I want to just to recognize that there were certain discussions we had. Nothing bad, but something that we wish not to record. But why am I sharing with you is because as you click on this link to listen later on next, whatever you are listening, I want you to understand that we have been very intentional in this series, led by our superintendent, Dana, that we are always going to think about what will we do, our actions. And so the story was about someone sharing with a group of learners this morning about her actions, her intentional growth and unlearning. And what I really want, why I want to invite you into that conversation without giving you the details, is because some of that growth was very uncomfortable for her. I want to repeat that. Some of that growth was uncomfortable. It led to ask yourself questions and ask herself questions and ask people close to her questions. And something I want to share now on it that she shared, Adana, was the name of her street and who the street was named after. And how intentionally she's working to remove a colonizer's name from the street she lives on. We have lived in years of erasing and misplacing and misidentifying children. And so she's very unapologetic. That is why I wanted to share this part for the recording. She's unapologetic, Dana, of every single time she's going to write the email to our political leader and to the community. And she's not stopping, and she's unapologetic because she realized I need to disrupt. And if it's going to be her email alone, sending to that office, they're going to be tired of her sending those mails by post, by email, to say, I need the name of our street in this community change from this person's name. And it came home strong to me today that when we are doing the work of disrupting and dismantling, it is necessary for us to understand. Something just came to me. Look on the screen, everybody. It's a word, circle with somebody's red ink and cross out. That's disrupting. If you and I were teaching a class and a child brought this to us, we'd be saying to them, this is incorrect. Go fix it. Go fix it. So I want us to realize as we start this conversation that we're going to be looked on, quote unquote, as a teacher as go fix this, because this is not how we write, but we are being intentional about marking up with our red ink those things. If anybody remember when we were younger teachers, because we're still young and fabulous, Dana, but when we were younger teachers, anybody remember when we used to use red ink pen as a weapon? I remember. Red ink pen was like the weapon. You put those ticks, but you put those X and you sign and you make, and sometimes some teachers were horrible with it. It was horrible. So I want you to realize we have to put the red ink pen on those things in our school that we want to highlight that these are incorrect. Mark those red X's beside those things, metaphorically speaking, that you see around you that are incorrect. And one of those things is our deficit thinking. The idea of looking at people and not just and I want to bring something forward right now, not just our students, but our colleagues. I have had teachers talk stories about how they were spoken to as colleagues because they are either LGBTQ or they're in First Nations or they're new immigrant. And I can tell you my own story. When I joined the school board, I was an award-winning teacher. I graduated out of over 500 people from my teachers' college with the most teaching award that year. I broke a record. I walked across, but I didn't get to graduate. Long story, I tell you about that. They had a bomb threat in the college the day before our graduation, and we had to cancel our graduation But if I'd gotten to walk across the stage, I'd have walked across the stage 6 times with 6 teaching awards. Made a record in our history, right? My name is on some plaque there. But I'm saying that for you to understand that when I walk into a school here in 2011, I have had, as a substitute teacher, I had teachers who spoke to me as if I knew nothing. And I understand that in some, watch me carefully, may be trying to help Dana because they realize I am new to the Canada. I am new to, they make certain assumptions. They by my accent, they realize I wasn't from here. By me asking certain questions, they realize I'm new to the board and new. But immediately, Dana, new meant deficit. Immediately, new meant you are not good. I remember a long time I told you, somebody asked me once if I was shy because they saw me somewhere very quiet. And I said, I'm not shy, I am new. Two different things, right? And so they spoke to me as if, I remember more than one occasion, I was spoken to by a teacher as if I knew nothing. And then I had to turn to her and I said to her, yeah, I get it. I'm new to Canada, but I've been a teacher for years. I've been an award-winning teacher. Teacher of the year at my school, over 70 teachers, I was teacher of the year. And so I want you to understand that even with our colleagues, our parents, how many of you can confess that you discovered months or a year after that the parent you spoke to at the evening meeting the other day was actually a medical doctor, but you had no idea there was a medical doctor? Because I guess they didn't come to school in their white coat and maybe they are new immigrant or something. We have to get to know who we are dealing with. I have seen us, I said us because I'm guilty, speak to parents as if they don't know nothing. We have to bring them in. So I want us to understand there's a persistence of low expectation and deficit mentality that is evidenced in many of our classrooms. And these deficit ideologies impact student identity and sense of belonging. It affects what they are offered. I want us to read that number 3 together. It affects what they are offered and the opportunities they are afforded. And when we start our series, Dana, this was one of the first topics we did with the leadership group. So I know you're remembering some of this. But I want you to look at number 3, that it affects what they are offered and the opportunities they are afforded. I've told you before that I've had parents who demanded that their girls be at the front of my dance performance because their girls do ballet. And they were asked, they were at a trouble with the little Indian girl at the front because she should not be given those opportunities to be the star of the dance, especially when dance is so big in the school. So we have to understand how all of this privilege and power and leadership and the lack of leadership impacts deficit thinking in our schools. And we lament that we don't have the tools. And we want to talk about strength-based approaches more than deficit approaches. So I bring that picture to your attention, everybody, because I want you to see in that picture carefully. What we see there is, we're going to assume it's a parent and a child, but we see an adult and a child. And we see that they are facing, their words, they are facing unemployment and hunger. That's what they are facing. But I want you to notice what the cartoonist did at the back. At the back, the cartoonist had strategically placed 2 figures in suits. And all these conversation they're having in the back is deficit. Take a note of the conversation in the back. The cartoonist is very deliberate about it. What are our conversations about our students? The more and more I go into spaces and listen to people talking about de-streaming, the conversations are really bad. Now that we are de-streaming, you hear some really horrible streaming stories. And I guess many of us have our own. They're bad streaming stories. And I'm going to share with you my streaming story right now. So when I just started teaching as a young teacher, I work at a school, that big school, 2,000, maybe 500 students. we had shift system, which means school kept twice per day for 2 different sets of students. There are so many people in the school, we had a shift system. So one went at 7:15 to 12:15, and one shift was 12:30 to 5:15. That's our school, big school. And in each shift, each school, 2 schools in one, there were 6 grades, 6 of each grade. So grade 1 to 6, and six streams. And we listed the streams, Dana, grade 6A, B, C, D, E, F. My first job, I taught grade 6F. So you have to understand where my heart comes from when I tell certain stories. That was my excitement as a teacher. I had 45 students in grade 6F. Here comes the catch to this. Those students knew they were in grade 6F, Victoria. They knew. We told them, it was on the board. You had to write your heading on the board, 6F. We never write 6 Campbell or 6C. You write 6F. They knew they were in 6F. They knew they were not going to be chosen for anything, Victoria. No, I'm telling you right now, I'm remembering it. They knew they weren't going to be chosen for anything. They knew they weren't on the spelling bee. They couldn't even try for the spelling bee. They couldn't even try for nothing. Right? They couldn't even try it for nothing. And what I'm thinking about, why I'm bringing this up, Victoria, because I'm thinking about the stories I am hearing. And I'm thinking about my own stories. Because in that school, I can tell you something. Because you are in grade 6F, you are really left on your own and left aside. So let me give you an example what I mean by that. Let's say we are doing a singing competition or we're selecting students. We just don't go to grade 6F to select anybody, period. You get me now, Victoria? That kind of, it's like a dumping ground. Well, the best kids are in grade 6A, B, some of them in C. After C, we kind of done. And I can tell you something. And this is something that people will argue with me about, but I would always say, you would go to some of these schools and you would notice even the teacher who was placed with grade 6F, Dana. Let's talk superintendents and leadership now. And I'm going to tell you this, Dana. In schools, you would see the lazy teacher, the teacher who don't want to teach anymore, but waiting for the 2 years for the pension to be over, the teacher who was angry on arrival every day, and just to deal with that teacher, the principal put that teacher at grade 6F or E or D. So now we have a set of students who are struggling in deficit with a teacher who do not care. Anybody see the danger of the equation? And that's my story, because I've lived that, I've seen that. And one of the things that I promoted, it's doing my leadership, doing my master's in education leadership, my PhD in education leadership, and also being an administrator for a school for a small time. I said I want the best teachers with the students who need the most teaching. I want the best teachers with the students who need the most teaching. And that is why when I walk out of Teachers College, Dana, with being the best graduate, I told the story before, a reading program. I became the reading teacher. I asked and begged to start a reading program in a school where I was privileged. I want you to listen to my choice of word. Privileged to get grade 5 at the time, A, B, C. Grade 4, A, B, C. Grade 3, A, B, C. I could get the top grade. And I said, let me take all this magic I have to teach reading. And that followed my career for a bit. I taught reading in the Bahamas in special ed programs. So I know what it is to see this. So I want to show you my next cartoon as we move on. So I want you to think about streaming. Think about your own stories. Think about it. So let's move on. This is my next cartoon. And I want you to take a look at this cartoon, everybody. And I want you to notice how intentional the cartoonist is. And what he did, which I love, he was very fair. He brought in all the politics. So we see those persons, the camera, we see the media, we see politics, we see other political leaders, and we see the experts. We see people who are disconnected from school. So I get it. I get it. But I want us to draw attention to the decks of the students. Each student is literally labeled as a problem. Drugs, hungry, daddyless, and so on. In addition, look at the teacher's decks. You see the paperwork and you see the lack of fund. I think she's collecting money for supplies. But who are these kids? I want to ask you a question. Who are these kids? And why do they all have these problems? Or do they have these problems? And here's another question for you. Why is daddy or dadless, single parent, situated as a problem? Who decide that dadless is a problem? That was very intentional by the cartoonist. Does the teacher label our students, or are they already constructed that way? Things for you to consider as you're looking at the picture. How do the labels come to define students? Who or what is the root of the problems, and how does the teacher perceive a role in these students, in the lives of these students? That brings us to the terminology deficit thinking. And deficit thinking is a common way of thinking that affects our general way of being in and constructing the world. Differences from the norm, write the word norm down, everybody, are immediately seen as being deprived, negative, and disadvantaged. It never questioned the legitimacy of what is deemed to be normal. Again, write down that word, circle it on your paper. Or does it consider the differences may actually go beyond expected norms? It discourages teachers and administrators from recognizing the positive values of certain abilities, dispositions, and action. Now, let us unpack this a little bit more, everybody. Let us unpack this a little bit more. Differences from the norm are immediately seen as being deprived, negative, and disadvantaged. Remember what the norm is in our school system? Remember, our system is built on colonized ideologies and ideas. This morning I shared with a group, Dana, I said to them, when I was a child, many of us want to be like Christopher Columbus. You know why? Because we were taught that he discovered the world. And if you want to be a discoverer and an expediter and be, go on an expedition, not expediter, but go on an expedition, then you want to be like Columbus, who saved us. We were all naked and stupid and dumb people because we had no sense. And there came Columbus in the Pinta de Nina and the Santa Maria to save all these people who are nothing. Wouldn't you want to be Columbus too if that was how you were taught? Of course. And then we grew older. Because remember, our textbooks came from England, Dana. And then we started having people who were changing the curriculum and explaining to us who we really are and how powerful and amazing we really are before we were stolen. Before we were stolen. We were kings and princes and amazing before we were stolen. And just as our First Nations people, just as First Nations people, and that's a good miss. I just made an error there, and I want people to notice the error for the recording that I just made. I said our, and I learned, Dana, about a year and a half ago, we mustn't say our First Nations people. Just say First Nations people. We don't give ownership to them. So that was a mistake, slip of my tongue, and I have apologized for that. And I want to make sure I put that there for the recording. I don't need to stop the record and clean that up. We need to realize that these are errors we are making, and until we have come to normalize difference, we will continue make these errors and offend people. And if somebody listened to me, heard I said our First Nations, and you were offended by that, you have all right to be offended, and I apologize. We don't say our First Nations people. So this is it. When we see something that is different, immediately it is seen as deprived, negative, and disadvantaged. And here comes a powerful part of the conversation. Now, this is where I want you to tie it in right now. Tie this in right now. It discourages teachers and administrators from recognizing the positive values of certain abilities, dispositions, and actions. We talk about culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy. We talk about diversity leadership. We talk a lot about culturally relevant and responsive educator. We have had these conversations, you know. We have had these conversations. We have had these conversations. But what we keep on doing is when we have this conversation is that we keep forgetting when we have this conversation that difference does not mean less than. So let's move on. So so we see the students as a laundry list of problems. And these educators are unable to look past students' more challenging behavior, making meaningful and reciprocal relationships impossible. If you see them as a burden, there's not going to be a reciprocal relationship, because as far as you're concerned, there's nothing that they have to offer you. So this is something we need to ask ourselves. How do we see our children? What do we see them as bringing to the teaching and learning process? Do we see them? Do we see their language, the value, their histories, their stories? Do we see that? I tell you something and I share it with you. I know I have been complimented many times about my storytelling skills, and I'm a storyteller, Dana. But I tell you a story before. When I just started teaching at OISE 3 years ago in the master's program, the first semester I got my evaluation, I had a bunch of students who had really horrible things to say about my stories, telling about why is he telling these stories, and he's not a real professor, and where are the journal articles? And you know why, Dana? Because they knew from all the other white professors they have had that the way to teach at a university master's degree course is to give them major journal articles written by, something I learned this week, 5% of all of those leadership articles are written by 5% of people. So no other voices are even included. That's why when you skip to your journals, you can barely find a First Nation journal article. Ask yourself, many of you went to teachers college and university, you have masters, you have PhD like myself. Ask yourself how many of those readings were written by a Black person, a racialized person, a woman, written by a First Nation person. Ask yourself. These are the things we need to ask. Dana, something that you held on to, which I admire, was the idea of critical cultural consciousness. You remember the conversation we had about that? Critical cultural consciousness. What does that mean? It means this, Dana. It means to ask yourself, how this reading I've gotten in university, all of this reading, it's coming from the same voice, the same normal voice. So when you get a piece of literature from Dr. Campbell, the first thing you scrutinize is, I wonder if it's good enough. I wonder if it's good enough. So I want you to understand what happens. So when my student, as I get back to my story, some of them who criticize my storytelling skills and why is he using story, what they were doing was simply saying, hey, this is not what we are used to, and this is not good. Then January, I went back to school, Dana. I introduced myself and I made it clear to the entire courses, all the students, you'll be hearing stories until you can't hear stories anymore. And this is a pedagogy. And I went into it. Now, everywhere you pop up, you're hearing people talking about storytelling as pedagogy. Now, every time I do a workshop, somebody compliments me, Dr. Campbell, that was such a good story. I connected, I grew, I learned something. And those people are the smart ones who realize the story is a story, but they're going to extend their critical consciousness using the story as a base. So let's see what happens when we don't have it. And they in turn blame their students. you're coming to school without. You don't have. You weren't born. Your English, your accent. I'm going to give you another quick story. I told the story before, but I think I want to tell it again. I started teaching one September. School was excited. I was so happy. School was ready to go. And I was teaching grade 1. And I was a maths class. I love teaching maths, elementary school. I love teaching maths. My kids are on the carpet. We are living our best maths life. And I cue on my YouTube video because I love to use YouTube video. I've used YouTube videos very, very well in my class. And I have a whole system how I use my videos to help me teach. And the class is dominant, mostly white children, white kids, a few, maybe about 4 or 5 Asian kids and one little Indian boy. And I started to teach. There was no black student in the class. Even one is an Indian boy, and started to teach. And the video is one of my favorite maths video. The video is a cartoon, but the voice is that of an Indian woman. And she started to teach, and the class burst out laughing. And they started to laugh, and the little Indian boy started to cry. What would you do? Would you be teaching maths still because you're good at maths? Immediately I stopped the maths class. I pull everybody together. And watch what I did, Garrett. I want you to note what I did, Garrett. I did not center the little boy was crying. We have to stop centering. You know what I heard somebody said to me the other day? Not to me. I saw it on what I said to me. I mean, social media. They said, oh, we hope we could get someone who's First Nations, who understand the school, to come and talk to us. I was like, are you freaking serious? I was like, are we serious? In the middle of this, the first thing comes to your mind is, let me go find a First Nation person so they could sit us down and talk to us about the school and the 215. You know what I've been doing? I have been reading. Today on my break, I watched a video, Dana, on YouTube. I am unlearning. And I have done a lot of unlearning, Dana, but I'm still unlearning. I watched a YouTube video while eating my sushi today. Today I had sushi for lunch, Dana. Oh, I love sushi, by the way. When we go for lunch, Dana, you have to take me to sushi or we go somewhere nice. I like sushi, right? And in the middle of that, I put my YouTube on, Dana, because I took my break, and I was watching a video, adults who've been to the school. They were survivors talking. I am learning. I am unlearning. Why do we have to always center the person who is hurting to now teach us again? That's what we're doing. Stop talking about slavery, and then you turn right around in your chair to the black student and said, so what do you think, Garrett? Like, seriously? Can we stop that foolishness, please? So we have to understand. So immediately, I didn't pay him any mind. I let him do his cry. And then I spoke to the other class members. And I said to them, why are you laughing? See, you have to be honest with children because they are honest with you. And they tell me, she sounds funny, Mr. Campbell. And I said, well, she sounds different, really. And I said, but I am also sound funny. I am Jamaican. And they said, yes, but you are Mr. Campbell. But I said, I have an accent. And what I did then, I started moving fast, and I started Googling, YouTubing all kind of other people, and I played all kind of accent, and I played Trinidadian accent, and I played Spanish accent and French accent, and I was just playing accent. By the time I was finished with my students, everybody wanted an accent, honey. Everybody wants an accent. If I was Oprah, I'd say, you get an accent, you get an accent, you get an accent, you get an accent. What did I share that story for, Dana? And I know you smile, you laugh, but you know them. You see where I'm going with this conversation. I wanted to disrupt the deficit idea that because there's an accent, you are funny and you are less than and you are silly. I want you to understand the work of disruption happens at every single level. Now, here comes my piece I want to share with you right now. Relationships. I told you, Dana, through our work, through our conversation, we have developed a relationship. We have started out with professional. We are still at professional, but every now and then you will ask me about my day. You asked me the other day my height. We ask about food. Now we're thinking that when we go for lunch, we're going to get sushi. Now you know I like sushi. The little things that are coming out. You see what I'm saying? Now watch this. A year from now, a month from now, 3 months, 4 months from now, you may sit in your house and you said, I want to ask Dr. Campbell or Andrew, you call me Andrew, something. You know you wouldn't be infringing on me, Dana. You know you wouldn't be using me and abusing me. We have developed relationship. You wonder why some LGBTQ people right now, we're studying LGBTQ in our school. Thank you, Tina. I see your comment in the box. Thank you, Tina. It's important we share in our chat box. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Tina. And I want to read it. You said, and you taught them acceptance and understanding instead of just telling them, stop laughing. Thank you, Tina, for that. That is why I keep on telling you, don't hold back your opinions in the chat, because when you add to it, you broaden the understanding. And that was powerful, Tina. I'm going to have to capture that and put it in the workshop, because what happened is that it wasn't about saying, well, stop laughing, stop laughing. It was a lesson. It was a lesson. And that's how it's supposed to be. Thank you for that. So that is it. That is what it is. That is exactly what it is. These are what we call the incidental teaching. Anybody remember those days? And the hidden curriculum? This is it. That's the best teaching, you know, the incidental teaching. So let's get back to the story, Dana. We're talking about LGBTQ month. You know how many persons are clamoring to find somebody who identifies LGBTQ so they could come and talk at their school and say certain things and put them on a showpiece? But you can imagine if you and I have a relationship, Dana, and you genuinely don't understand something, and because you know my sexuality, you have the permission, you have the access. Listen, my choice of words now. You have the permission, you have the access, you have built relationship. Asked me, turned to me and said, Andrew, I keep hearing people say this. What does that mean? You have relationship with me, you have access to me. And that is the issue we have sometimes in our schools, because we all deficit thinking about certain people. We do not have access to them, and we have not built any relationship. We have to understand the power of relationships. That is why I'm listening to people talking about how they're going to intentionally build a relationship with the community, with the parents. You have to build it. Deficit thinking leads to stereotyping and prejudging. It marginalizes certain people on the basis of misinformation and misconstructions. So, how are we going to break that down? We're going to get into it in a minute. But before that, I want us to look at this. We have seen this before. If you have been to any of the sessions, you have seen this before, maybe twice, because I bring it in all the time. Where are you on the cultural continuum for you to understand this is not deficit? This is a powerful moment. This is somebody who is speaking different. This is not deficit. How do we see that? We have heard people crying and lamenting about ESL. How do we change how we see our students? Have you realized that the ESL student who doesn't know English has already 4 languages under their belt sometimes? How are we doing that? My student in grade 6F, go back to that story. We entered a national festival. We went to sing. I took them to sing at the national festival competition. I realized they are like a performer set, and I want to put them on stage. We did not get a gold medal, Dana. We did not get a silver medal, Dana. We did not get a bronze, Dana. We did not get a merit, because they give award for those things. We simply went from the local finals. We end up at the parish. We call it the parish finals. But my grade 6F got to go on a bus to compete on a stage. Come on, self-esteem. Come on, self-esteem building. Come on, self-esteem building. Come on, saying teacher loves me. Come on, saying teacher cares. You have to realize, and that's a win. The older I got as a teacher, I realized how powerful that was for them. It was a big win. Win looks different for different students. Win, write that down somewhere. Winning looks different for different students. So we get to the part of the knapsack. We get to the part of the knapsack. I want you to look at them like how we look at the shoes this week and ask yourself. We see the deficit thinking in so many places in our schools. We see it in our curriculum, our teacher hiring, our support programs, our ESL, in the ways in which we provide accommodations and modifications. Sometimes we allow those students to feel that they're begging us something. That's deficit, you know. We see it in the stream, in the disproportionate number of Black kids, what we see in gifted programs, or even in the definition and identification of who can possibly be gifted. We see it in how we talk to certain parents and the expectations we hold of certain parents. We see this deficit thinking in certain students are good at and what we will give them access to. The Black kids can run. Place them on the athletic team and the basketball team, and we are shocked and devastated when the Asian kid does not do well in maths. Deficit thinking, assumptions, stereotypes, they impact all of us. So what I'm going to do at this time, we're going to go into our breakout room, just one for the afternoon. I want to leave that there so everybody could see. If you're looking at this video later on, I want you to ask yourself one question. What is in their backpack? What are the things in their backpack? And I could show you later on, I'll show you examples of the tons of things that were listed in other students' backpack. What are the things in their backpack? We're going to spend 10 minutes to talk about that. And then when you spend 10 minutes, you don't need to write anything. It's a discussion. What is in their backpack? List what they're carrying. And then I want you to take about 3 minutes to list it. 3 minutes to list. And take the other 7 minutes to look at solutions. I remember a group, Dana, the other day, they list mental health. And there were so many, I was so proud of the group, so many solutions about what they can do. Some people share what they have been doing, the mindfulness, the mindful moment, the music, the things they have been sharing for the student mental health. Right now, we said we're going to be stuck at home. The kids are not going to get to come to school. I hope we know when we come back in September, we can't teach maths the first day of school anymore. We have to build back a community. I hope as teachers, you're thinking of all the ways you're going to build back community with those kids. If I were going to be a teacher, if I was going to be a teacher in any grade come September, in elementary school, I was going to plan a whole month of how we're going to do community. I'm going to do neighborhood walk until they have to call the police and say, here come Mr. Campbell down the street with these 20 children behind him again. What? I need them to connect. I need them to understand they are loved and they belong and school is made for them. How are we giving those solutions? So I want us to do that. So I'm going to stop the recording. For those of you who watch afterwards, when we come back, we'll continue. So we're going to go into our breakout rooms. We don't do our breakout rooms. So let me pause the recording. So I'm going to stop sharing first and then I can pause. Yeah, so welcome back again, everyone, to the conversation. And I'm sure you had a really good conversation in your breakout room. And so, yeah, what is in their knapsack? I want to show you something. I want to share with you something. I want to share with you something. So this was done by another group. And I want to show you the intentionality. I've never seen this before of all the stuff that were listed. Right? All the stuff that were listed as being in the student's knapsack. And I want to show you all the stuff there, the intentionality with it, the sibling, the special need. There's so many things there. Take a minute to look at it and see all the stuff listed there. I want to do that so you can see. We know the knapsacks are packed with stuff, but one thing some of us didn't realize are some of the things that happened, the trauma from their own country. See, look at that, the fear of missing out, the living in foster care, the caregivers working late, the depression, the hunger. Look at all the stuff. Look at all the stuff listed. And what they did, they look at solutions. And that's what I want to show you. Look at the COVID, look at the different solutions. So I want you to realize that look at the economic insecurity. Look at the economic insecurity and the ideas that were brought forward. We as educators, we have to be solution oriented. We have always been solution oriented. I think so. But I want you to see that. Look at this idea down there. I love this. This is something that I've seen happen before at a school. It's not new, where the librarian decide she's going to keep the library open for a longer time on her own time. On her own time. So I want you to understand that we have to be intentional about breaking down these deficit in thinking. So let's gather now and quickly, let's run this through about how we're going to do that disrupting now. And so, 4 things I want to leave with you why we need to dismantle. 4 things, everybody, why we need to dismantle. Let's get it together. 4 things why we must dismantle. Deficit thinking oversimplifies students' vast, heterogeneous experiences. We have to dismantle that. We have to. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Kim. Kim, I saw your comment. And Kim, I could tell you, I maybe have gotten in trouble because I've literally boasted on your group more than once. More than once, I boasted. I said, whoa, the ideas that were coming out was amazing. And that is how it's supposed to be, Kim. I admire that. That's something to be admired and to be shared, so thank you for that. And the next one, so there's 4 things we need to talk about dismantling. And let's take the first one. So the first one says, deficit thinking oversimplifies the vast and heterogeneous experiences. We are not from the same place. We don't have the same experiences. All these 3 students, though they are given those boxes, are the same. They are experiencing the game differently. I want you to take a note of that. These students are experiencing the game differently. Take a note of that. They are experiencing the game differently. Or somebody would say to me, Dr. Campbell, maybe one of them is not even experiencing the game at all. Right? I remember I was a part of a meeting and the person who wrote the report shared and said it has come to our attention that there's a portion of our students that is experiencing the program differently. Very political, way they frame it. What we're simply saying is that a bunch of students, at that time it was a bunch of Black students who are feeling disengaged from the program, feeling not seen, feeling not heard, feeling not a part of it, feeling that they do not belong. The next one, deficit thinking focuses on students' perceived shortcoming rather than their strength. I want you to take a look at this picture. You have seen it before. Educators operating through a deficit-oriented lens do not acknowledge the varied life experiences of marginalized students. Rather than encouraging students to inform the nature of the learning environment, educators attempt to fix them and to fit them in a mold defined by society rife with inequities such as sexism, racism, ableism, and classism. And that quote comes to us from Heinbach, Fidler, Mitola, and Patini, 2019. Look at those students. Look at the students in this picture, in this cartoon. Some of them already failed on arrival. They failed. I call this picture failed on arrival. I've used it so many times, but I call it failing on arrival. They have no chance of succeeding because we have already seen that they cannot. We already said, well, you can't. So I want us to be careful how we see our students and how we have labeled them. The next one, deficit thinking focuses on language. A big one people are now looking at, language that further oppresses or further oppress. Remember my blunder at the beginning when I said we have to grow and learn language. Disadvantaged students at risk, marginalized, difficult students, inner city students, those students from those areas. We as a profession have been quick. This is a quote again coming from the same article by Heinbach, Feidler, Mitola, and Patney, 2019. We as a profession have been quick to adopt language such as at-risk, gaps, aging to describe entire groups of students. These terms are a manifestation of our deficit thinking. And deficit thinking undermines. I think we have talked about this a lot. It undermines. We need to ensure that inclusivity is not enacted within a systematic framework organized according to a deficit thinking. We have to be careful. You know, I was asked a question the other day about the white savior mentality. Somebody said to me, Dr. Campbell, she was honest. She said, you know, you're hearing a lot about people going to Haiti and other places as a white person to help. And she said to me, she was honest, is it that I should not be doing that, Dr. Campbell? I said, absolutely, yes, you should. You should do it. I said, the problem we have is when you go to these places, sometimes what we do, we behave as if when we went there, we were Christopher Columbus. What we are doing is giving them Christopher Columbus energy. We are coming to Haiti and Africa and other places to help you to do some work, and you know nothing. So we soup it with a white savior mentality. We don't even care that they have a way of doing it. Yes, we are there to help. Yes, we are there to strengthen. Yes, we are there to build. But we have to see what kind of foundation is already there. And that is the issue. So I said to her, no, if you get an opportunity to go to Haiti to do some from a missionary teaching, I said, go. But do not be taking a bunch of selfie with you in your beautiful light blonde hair, nice summer dress, and 7 black kids almost half naked, looking dirty around you, and then you post it on social media. That is the problem we're having. So what is the solution? It comes from what we have been talking about the last time: culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy. Being a culturally relevant and responsive educator, moving from deficit, holding high expectations. And that comes from one thing: strength-based. Moving from deficit to strength-based approaches. Take a picture of that slide, everybody. Moving from deficit to strength-based approach. Don't keep saying, look what is missing. Ask yourself, what have I got? Look what we have got. 2 different attitudes, the same scene, 2 different attitudes. How are you using strength-based? And one strength-based we have used is culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy, which we talk about, where we focus on our students' strengths, where the students' previous experiences or their cultural capital is used, where we adopt alternative pedagogies. Remember my story about storytelling. There are many ways to teach. There are many ways to teach. There are many ways to teach. There are many ways to learn. And some of us, we have to learn to stop teaching like how we were taught, because that was the problem. We want to focus on language of hope. We want to acknowledge the needs of unique population. They have needs. We know that. That's why I put the activity, what is in their knapsack? I am telling you, there are things in their knapsack. They have needs. There are issues. There are concerns. We want to be very frank and honest about that. But we want to also realize that and understand and underpin. I want us to understand that school is a safe place where students can connect to their own identities and build a foundation for confidence. That word come back again: self-esteem and self-awareness. We have to make schools safe for our students. And we have to move away from being deficit and get to a place of strength-based approaches. Don't forget, we focus on our strength, their capital, and we create a safe space for them. I'm going to thank you so much for listening. I'm going to stop the recording, and we're going to take time for about 1 or 2 questions.